Hello, BookTube. I've got some new arrivals for you. I know we did the mail, and you briefly saw the bean as she tore apart one package and then sort of gave it a miss for the rest of it. She is sound asleep right now. Sound asleep directly behind me. I can't show her to you. She's curled up in a ball, wedged against the base of my spine. So it's a confusing thing, this miniature schnauzer business. It's a confusing thing. I swear there are elements of it that are almost beagle-like. She has a weird relationship with cuddling. It's the strangest thing. She won't initiate cuddling, but she clearly loves it. So I have to go and get her, and when I do, when I reach over and grab her in order to cuddle her, she's like, oh, so arms out stiff, look of alarm on her face. Anyway, in addition to those packages, I also want to show you more new stuff that might interest you. You never know. The first one off very colorfully. This is Green Lantern. This is a Green Lantern novel for young people called Legacy. So that is not any Green Lantern that you know. That is a child. This is by Min Lee and Andy Tong. Andy Tong is the artist, and the artwork in here is incredible. Just incredible. Let me show you. Look at that. There. These kids are on the top of a skyscraper. There's Green Lanterns versus Sinestro. Just the artwork's incredible here. Let's see what we have to say here. Okay, this is a middle grade graphic novel, and it comes out in late January. Introduces. Okay, this is. It reduces readers age 8 to 12 to the world's first Vietnamese-American Green Lantern, Tai Pham. 13-year-old Tai lives in the apartment above his grandmother's store in a room crammed with sketch pads and comic books. Tai's youthful imagination cannot prepare him for the world he is thrown into. He must overcome his greatest obstacle in order to keep his grandmother's legacy alive, and that obstacle is fear. And I can't wait. I just can't wait. This is look at that. There's Jon Stewart, who meets Tai and then says, "Wait, you're a child. How old are you? 6, 8?" So we'll see. We'll see what that's like. But that's our first thing, and it's a graphic novel, a Green Lantern graphic novel for middle grade. Then we have another example of something that is cropping up so often, even in this first week of 2020, that I'm starting to think maybe it's a trend. That maybe it's going to be something the year's books will be noteworthy for, and that is translated fiction. And this is translated. This comes out in April. This is translated from the Polish. This is The King of Warsaw. Look at that cover. This is Amazon Crossing, I believe. Yes, it is. This is Amazon Crossing. It's clearly a different cover designer than they've used ever before. And this is translated from the Polish by Sean Gasper Bye, B-Y-E. And that is the author's name. The book's information tells me that he is a well-known Polish author. I am going to call him Timothy Gallagher. I'm never going to try. S-C-Z-C, I ask you. I'm going to call him Timothy Gallagher. I want to make sure that King of Warsaw, a novel by Poland's literary phenomenon Timothy Gallagher, and translated by Sean Gasper Bye, is on your radar for spring of 2020. Gallagher is one of the most read and revered Polish novelists of his generation, and now, for the first time, he will be published in English. Isn't that amazing? This brilliant original novel becomes a runaway bestseller when it was first published in Poland in 2016, and it is sure to make an impression when it hits the U.S. literary scene in April. So this was a Polish bestseller by Timothy Gallagher. And the book is set in 1937. For nearly 20 years, Poland has been independent after more than a century of foreign occupation. But what that is about to change as Hitler's power is rising, fascism is escalating, and his campaign is moving east. Warsaw is a city divided, Jew versus Christians, socialist versus nationalist, gang versus gang. In the boxing ring, Jacob Zazpiro commands respect, revered as a hero by the Jewish community. Outside, He instills fear as he muscles through Warsaw as an enforcer of a powerful crime lord. Murder and intimidation have their rewards. He revels in luxury, spends lavishly, and indulges in all the pleasures that barbarity offers. For a man battling to be king of the underworld, life is good, especially when it's a frightening time to be alive. As the threat of violence hangs over Poland, its marginalized and vilified Jewish population hopes for a promise of sanctuary in Palestine. Jacob isn't blind to the changing tide. What's unimaginable to him is abandoning the city he feels destined to rule. I think that sounds fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So I will be reading this soon. Not right away, but soon. This next one has a bunch of hubbub about it that makes me think that maybe I have been missing out on something. FOMO, and I don't like that. I like to be right on top of the hep stuff the kids are talking about. This is by Madeline St. John, and it is the Woman in Black. Women in Black. And it has a blurb on the front from Hilary Mantel, the book I most often give as a gift to cheer people up. And there's also, there are blurbs on the inside from Helen Garner and Clive James. So that's no small thing. And I guess that I have missed the boat on this. This is available for the first time in the U.S. But it was, when was this published? 1993. 1993. So in Australia, this has been a hit that I haven't known about. Let's see here. Originally published in Australia in 1993 to bestsellerdom, and now available in the U.S. for the first time. Madeline St. John's rollicking debut novel, The Women in Black, which comes out in mid-February, captures 4 unforgettable women busy selling dresses in Sydney, Australia's goods department store during the bustling holiday season and trying to build lives that they dream about. The inspiration for the Sony Pictures film Ladies in Black, which came out in 2019 and yours truly did not see, the book follows Patty in her mid-30s, toiling at goods for years. Her husband Frank eats steak every night, watches a few minutes of television, and then heads to bed. Patty is desperate to have a baby, but Frank is simply too tired for that kind of thing. Readers meet sweet but unlucky Faye, who wants to settle down with a nice man, but somehow nice men don't see Faye as marriage material. Then there's glamorous Magda, who runs the high-end gowns department. Magda, who moved to Sydney from Slovenia, is cultured and continental and has certain aspirations for opening her own boutique one day. And Lisa, a clever and shy teenager, takes a job at Goods during her school break. Lisa wants to go to college and become a poet, but her father objects to both notions. By the time the last markdown dress is sold, all the women's lives will be changed forever. So it sounds like a whole bunch of people have read and loved this book. And I've never heard of it. Well, that has to change. Obviously, that has to change. This next one, I haven't read it, but the premise is head-scratching in just the way that I always think betokens a book that might be onto something. When some premises, as you have seen on this channel, sometimes I kick a book around fairly thoroughly when its premise is dumb. But some books, and we've seen those too on this channel, some books, the premise is so strange that you almost think, well, okay, maybe that's true. And this is one of those, I think. This is by Jessa Lingle, and it's An Internet for the People. And it's about Craigslist. Begun by Craig Newmark as an email to some friends about cool events happening around San Francisco, Craigslist is now the leading classified service on the planet. And all throughout this pub sheet, the word Craigslist is not capitalized. So I'm assuming that's an affect of Craigslist itself. I'm assuming that's the way that Craigslist likes to designate itself, as no capital. It's also a throwback to the early internet. The website has barely seen an upgrade since it launched in 1996. There are no banner ads. The computer doesn't profit off your data. And in this book explores how people use Craigslist to buy and sell, find work, and find love, and reveals why Craigslist is becoming a lonely outpost in an increasingly corporatized web. Drawing on interviews with Craigslist insiders and ordinary users, Jessa Lingle looks at the site's history and values, showing how it has mostly stayed the same while the web around it has become more commercial and far less open. She examines Craigslist's legal history, describing the company's courtroom battles over issues of freedom of expression and data privacy, and explains the importance of locality in the social relationships fostered by the site. More than an online garage sale, job board, and dating site, Craigslist holds vital lessons for the rest of the web. See? You wouldn't have thought of Craigslist this way. And I'm willing to bet this author's going to make a pretty good case. Holds vital lessons for the rest of the web. Never in a million years. Don't think I've looked at Craigslist in years. It is a website that values user privacy over profits, ease of use over slick design, and an ethos of the early web that might just hold the key to a more open, transparent, and democratic internet. So this comes out in early February. I'm gonna gobble it right up. I mean, it could be fascinating. It could be every bit. It could change my mind. It could get me back on Craigslist. I'll certainly do that anyway, I think, just because this has got my interest. Then this next one is, of course, a sweet spot for Steve, because it's set in Venice, and I love Venice, and it turns out the author does too. I want to show it to you. This is I can't remember if we saw the advanced copy of this thing. This is by Christopher Boland, and it's called A Beautiful Crime. And it's got a whole bunch of moving parts to it. Let me describe. It's a thriller. So those of you who like thrillers, especially in exotic locations, you got this to look forward to in late January. This is coming out in a couple of weeks. Christopher Boland has carved a singular literary niche writing thrillers about beautiful people visiting glamorous places, being wicked enough to bring Patricia Highsmith to mind. That's the New York Times that said that. Yet his novels also come packed with sharp, pointed social critiques that aren't afraid to explore dark and dangerous corners. With, quote, real intelligence and line-by-line dexterity, that's the Chicago Tribune, he takes readers into rarefied worlds where ambition and instinct often collide with the unspoken yearning and human frailty. And in this new book is set in present-day Venice, and it tracks a young American couple who have come to the exotic Italian city to perpetrate a high-stakes swindle. Things do not go quite as planned, as their imperfect deceit becomes entangled with the hard realities of love, loss, class, race, and sexuality. Let me tell you a little bit about the book. Nick Brink is a handsome 20-something trying to make it in New York City when he meets Clay Gilroy at the funeral of a once famous artist. Clay has just inherited the deceased collection of counterfeit antiques, half a decrepit Venetian palazzo, and crippling debt. Together, the two hatch a plan to escape to the enchanting, crumbling city of canals. To finance this adventure, they plan on unloading the faux treasures on an unsuspecting American retiree. But more than money stands in the way of their dreams. It isn't long before a harmless con leads to murder. And this book is rather unceremoniously going to do a couple of things. It looks to me like it's going to write a lot about contemporary Venice, which not a lot of people do. And Venice turns up a lot, but it turns up in an idealized format, and this doesn't sound like it's going to be that. And also, it's there, but you barely notice it. This is about a gay couple. The young couple who are going to embark on a swindle are two young men. That's pretty fascinating right there. So I'm very much looking forward to it, and this comes out right away. So I will just get to this. I won't put it off any longer. I have the advanced copy, and I have been putting off the advanced copy. That's not good. Can't keep doing that. This next one is fantasy, high fantasy, from an author that a lot of you love. I confess, he's never quite done it for me. But I'm willing to give it a try. I have, in fact, invested in the first two books in this series, and I remember them well enough so that I'm just going to launch onto the third one. This is Song of the Risen God by R.A. Salvatore. And this comes out in January as well. Yeah, this comes out in late January. And this is the conclusion of the Coven series, I think. This is the third book, and I think the final one. The climactic conclusion. Okay. With war coming to Fireark Spewer, I have no idea how to pronounce that. It is the once forgotten. God help us. Zokanai Empire starts with an X. Zokanai, who has declared violence upon humans west of the mountains. Loch Big is the Empire's first target, and led by the peerless general. I don't know what it is with these names. The Peerless General Tzatini, Tsatzini. All that stands in the way of the God Emperor's grasp for power is Aelin, Talmage, and their few remaining allies. Now those names at least I recognize. Those are from the previous books. Not all hope is lost, though, for far away from this place, an ancient tomb is uncovered by Brother Thaddeus of the Alabican Church. Within this ancient tomb is the power to stop the onslaught of the coming violence from the Empire, and possibly the power to reshape the very world itself. So, rousing climax. And you know, I know what this author does. I know what he does. I've read enough of his books to know that he is doing what he's doing very well. It's never connected with me. I don't quite know why. I don't quite know why. We'll see. I mean, I'm a big fan for third volumes in fantasy, for finishing volumes in fantasy series. A lot of times they bring out the best in their author. We'll see. I don't know one way or another. Then this next one is World War II keyhole history, meaning a tiny fragment of not a broad narrative sweep of World War II, but rather a small story. Something that's usually, keyhole history is usually that's been overlooked and is now getting a book of its own. And this sounds fantastic. It sounds just fantastic. This comes out in late January? Yes, late January. This is by Simon Parkin, and it's called A Game of Birds and Wolves. Look at that cover. Wait till you hear this. I have never heard of this before, and I've read a million World War II books, much less have a book of its own. So I'll be diving right into these. This is another reason why, I mentioned this in another video, this is another reason why I can't make Friday Reads videos, because I don't know what's coming. And I'm ready. I'm ready to launch at any minute. If I get a new book, I'm ready to launch. So I can't make a Friday Reads. It's not like... Anyway, and another key aspect of Friday Reads is what kind of progress you're making in the books that you're reading. And I can't do that either. Because I'm not going to tell you what progress I'm making in a book. Instead, I'm going to spend that time finishing the book. Anyway, this is an untold story of World War II about a secret game of battleship played out on the largest scale with life and death consequences. A renowned video game journalist to tell the tale. Okay, that should be a sentence. I'm assuming Simon Parker is a renowned video game journalist. Let's see here. By 1941, Winston Churchill had come to believe that the outcome of World War II rested on the battle for the Atlantic. Subject of a used book, a UK trade paperback I got just the other day that I've been making inroads in. Operation Raspberry was devised by Captain Gilbert Roberts and a group of 8 Wrens, that's Women's Royal Navy Service, assigned to his team as an attempt to stop the devastating success of German U-boats and turn the tide of World War II. Played on a linoleum floor divided into painted squares, model ships were moved across this make-believe ocean in a manner reminiscent of the childhood game Battleship. As you're going to see coming, I did not play Battleship as a child or as an adult. It's impossible to play Battleship when you're surrounded by dogs who like to eat little things. I was not welcome. Combining rich novelistic accounts with extensive research and interviews, Simon Parkin describes for the first time the role that women played in developing the Allied strategy which won World War II. It won World War II on the Atlantic in one part of one theater of the war. Okay, a large part of World War II was won on the battlefields of Russia. So let's not oversell things here. Told with unforgettable cinematic detail and larger-than-life characters, A Game of Birds and Wolves is a heart-wrenching story of ingenuity, dedication, and perseverance, bringing to life the incredible sacrifice required to defeat the Nazis at sea. And apparently, did I read already? Yeah, Steven Spielberg has already expressed interest in this book, and you can see why. But I can't wait. I love this sort of thing. I mean, I often deride, I think, or I might sound like I'm deriding keyhole histories. But that's only because I have, as you know, a huge sweet tooth for the sweeping, operatic, grand narrative histories of anything, whether it's the Korean War, or World War II, or World War I, or whatever. I have a marked sweet tooth for those, but I love these individual things, and I've written about quite a few of them. And then the last one. We'll end on a somber note. We'll end on a note of death and desiccation. This is by Eric Seaman, who is a professor of history at the University of Buffalo. And this is from the University of Pennsylvania Press. Yes? Yeah, the University of Pennsylvania Press. This is Speaking with the Dead in Early America. I don't have a sheet for it, but I found it fascinating. The description I just found fascinating. The cover, I could have picked a better one with my eyes closed. I could have designed a better one with my eyes closed. I reiterate my offer to all publishers, whether they be academic publishers, mainstream publishers, all of them. My services to design a cover for you are free of charge, day or night. Look at that. Anyway, in late medieval Catholicism, mourners employed an array of practices to maintain connection with the deceased. Most crucially, the belief in purgatory, a middle place between heaven and hell where souls could be helped by the actions of the living. In the early 16th century, the Reformation abolished purgatory, as its leaders did not want attention to the dead diminishing people's devotion to God. But while the Reformation was supposed to end communication between the living and the dead, it turns out the result was in fact more complicated than historians have realized. In the 3 centuries after the Reformation, Protestants imagined continuing relationships with the dead, and the desire for these relationships came to form an important and previously neglected aspect of Protestant belief and practice. And in this book, the author undertakes a 300-year history of Protestant communication with the dead. He chronicles the story of Protestants' relationships with the deceased from Elizabethan England to Puritan New England, and then on through the American Enlightenment into the middle of the 19th century with the explosion of the interest in spiritualism. He brings together a wide range of sources to uncover beliefs and practices of both ordinary people, especially women, and religious leaders. This prodigious research reveals how sermons, elegies, and epitaphs portrayed the dead as speaking to or being spoken to, how ghost stories and Gothic fiction depicted a permeable boundary between this world and the next, and how parlor songs and funeral hymns encouraged singers to imagine communications with the dead. See what I mean? See what he's talking about? That all the different ways that people held on. And I haven't read this yet, but it's on the agenda. I have a feeling it's probably a January release. And one of the chapters that really spoke to me is chapter 3, Talking Gravestones and Visions of Heaven, where it looks like the author is just going to analyze the sentiments carved into gravestones, the little verses. Nobody makes them anymore, but it used to be. There are plenty of old cemeteries that I have walked my dogs in here in Boston over the years that have plenty of those kinds of things, sentiments that were carved in there, that often do. I hadn't realized before I read that summary of the book, but often those little verses are in the voice of the dead. They are, pause a minute and look at this gravestone, because as I am now, you too will be. I hadn't realized that the gravestones are the dead speaking to the living. It's very much in the vocative. I think that's fascinating, so I'm going to give it a try. It's a little bit grim, but some days you're in the mood for that. So there you go. That was a bunch of new arrivals. So we have Speaking with the Dead in Early America. I would not have designed it like this, first of all. In 2 seconds, I could come up with a better design than this. And I probably wouldn't have called it that either. I would probably have used as a title, this would be the subtitle, and the title would probably be a line from one of those gravestone verses. Some of the lines are very evocative. Take a bit of a line like that, something that rings to the mind. But nevertheless, the book itself. And then A Game of Birds and Wolves, about the unknown strategic game that helped to win the war at sea. Song of the Risen God, the finale of the Coven series by R.A. Salvatore. I'll give it a try. A Beautiful Crime by Christopher Boland. A crime thriller set in modern-day, warts and all, portrait of Venice. An Internet for the People. A reevaluation of what is important about Craigslist, of all things. The Women in Black by Madeline St. John. Be curious to know, those of you in Australia, is this really the seismic hit that it seems to be? I've completely missed it. So I will happily make up for lost time. Then The King of Warsaw, a latest from Amazon Crossing, another one of the first time in English. I mentioned before, Amazon Crossing, no matter what you think of the many tentacles of Amazon out in the real world, the work that their publishing arm is doing is incontestably valuable. To have this author, who is a hit in his own time, in his own country, finally in English, that's great. And lastly, a middle grade Green Lantern graphic novel, Legacy. A Vietnamese American boy who apparently is chosen by a ring. That's kind of amazing. Can't wait to read it. I will read it as soon as I finish this video. But there you go. That is those are some new arrivals for you, and there'll be more to come. There's more books coming all the time. So I will wrap this up for now, but I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.